I don't feel like the worst things that have happened to me are the most interesting parts of me or my story. I think what I choose to do with it is.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Amanda de Cadenet, and this is The Conversation with Amanda de Cadenet. Last week I sat down with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand about why she identifies as an ambitious feminist. And this week I'm talking to Amber Heard about using personal pain to inspire advocacy and why she refuses to be defined by her past. Hi, babe.
Hi.
Thanks for having me over.
I'm so glad you're in my house.
It's so nice to be here.
Have you been here before?
Yes.
Okay.
I came here when you first moved. When I came here, I was relieved to see that you have a beautiful, comfy, cozy home that reflects you.
Thank you. I have a lot of wall space and I just cover it with things that make me happy. And
I know, where's
remind
the
me
picture of
home.
me?
You're all over the place, girl. Are you kidding me? She says her. I'm like, I can literally turn my head and point to a picture of you right now. Oh, God.
Aw, I'm happy to see you.
Yeah, I'm happy to see you too. It always warms my heart.
I have to say that over the last year, it has been such a joy to see you do one of the things that you're so good at doing, which is acting, and to see you have the opportunity to be in films and to do work that reflects who you are today. And I know one of the things for you that has always been frustrating is that because of your immense beauty and your immense intellect, people have had a hard time allowing you permission to play characters that combine both of those assets. Specifically, as a woman who's beautiful, often it's way too threatening for people to think that perhaps we could be really smart too. And how about funny as well?
Oh, no. You don't get funny.
You can have 2 out of the 3, maybe, but definitely not more than that.
I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Not funny.
Yeah.
Well, that's true because Hollywood is and has been notoriously, and I actually agree that it has gotten worse. I would argue since the 40s, really, and our representations of women, of the female experience as well. So what you find is that there is this binary system to which all women are applied. On one side, there's physical attributes of any variety. You know, you can be any shape, size, color, age, and that also affords you the ability to play various characteristics like you can be witty, funny, smart, bitchy, powerful, empowered, cruel.
You mean multiple? You can have a multiple characteristic woman,
right? You can have all these other dimensions, these character traits, and you can look in any sort of number of ways, but you can't be sexy. Your sexual viability being on the other end of the binary system, and so on the other side of the coin, you could have someone we find sexually attractive, and in that category. You can get a lot of splash, you can get a lot of play, you will get a lot of attention, you will work until maybe 30, 35, but it's incredibly limiting because you can't play anything else other than sexy. You are dependent, you're in a reactionary posture, and you are there to be a sexual bounce board for the male
gaze.
The male gaze and the male character you're playing opposite.
Right.
So you can be sexy, get a major flame, and then burn out really, really quickly. And you can't work over 35. You can't be typically a woman of color. You can't really represent a sexual, gender, religious, or ethnic minority. You can be a really sexy ingenue. And that's typically a white woman up between the ages of 18 to 30. And you can, in that category, just do that. Other category, you can be smart, witty, funny, kind, benevolent, cruel, all these other number of things. Interesting, nuanced, funny, but you're a character. Right. You are a best friend.
Not a leading role.
Nope.
You've always been aware of this, haven't you?
Yes, and I've been saying the same thing really since I started. I've been doing this job for 16, 17 years, and I have been, I think there's, interviews of me probably that are 15, 14 years old where I am saying this exact thing. I'm talking about the fact that for every one role For me, there are 3 for my male counterparts, and that is coming from a leading lady position, the ingenue role. So I've always been aware of this dichotomy.
Divide.
Yes, of having the system where I had to choose how. I mean, I didn't have a choice actually, because people see me see me as a certain kind of thing superficially, and so I'm thrown into one category without any ability to express any of the other nuances of the female experience within my own capacity or the character's capacity in which I have an interest in playing. Add to that the amount of roles and opportunities available to me.
Very, very small. I don't mean very small because you're not hireable for those roles. I mean, because of the stereotype that you have been placed into. It's one of the things that's always frustrated me about the perception of you. And I've known you for 13 years now. And you're right. You and I have been talking about this shit for so long. It's nothing new. It's just wonderful that people will actually report on it now, right? Because for many years, you would say something to a journalist, or even I would say something to a journalist, and it would just never make it into the article because that wasn't the narrative that they wanted to push. And so now we're in a different time where the stuff that we have been talking about for years is of interest culturally, more so. However, I don't really think that much has changed. So I think we have made some progress. But given the amount of phenomenally talented, brilliant, foxy, articulate, humorous, witty women that I know and that you know, who are entertainers, actors, whatever they may be, they're still not getting the opportunities. There is still a tiny handful who have access to those roles. And unfortunately, because they're so scarce, only a couple of people can get them. That's at least my perception as a non-actor. Would you think that's accurate?
Absolutely. Scarcity is the issue. The operative word being scarcity. Naturally, what does that do? For every speaking and named role for a woman, there are 3 for a man. This is without applying any other filters. So if you then add another filter of color or of age or any other kind of minority representation, those numbers get even worse.
Diminished.
So scarcity, what does that do to market value? What does that do to your competitive value? I'm inherently aware that I am 66% more replaceable. So if there's that vast of a disparity in between the opportunities available to us, just being man or woman, imagine what that does to your ability to assert yourself.
Well, there's always that threat of like, well, that's okay. If you don't want to do it, someone else will. It's always sort of hanging over everyone's head that they are replaceable. And the truth is they are. And people talk a lot about this moment of time that we're in culturally where there is more emphasis on women supporting women. Again, something we've been talking about forever and something that many of us have just been doing forever. That's just the way it is, right? And so what I have seen, which has been upsetting to me, but also I have compassion for, is that not all women are able to support other women because of the scarcity mindset, because we have been raised in a culture that has taught us to compete, that we are reminded every single day, hey, only a few of you can sit at the table. So guess what? That is in people's DNA. So no matter how much women do want to support one another, there are many who are just terrified to get usurped from the table. And therefore, they don't support women. And you see all kinds of crazy behavior that comes out that I've been on the receiving end of. I'm sure you have too. And then I have to remind myself, have compassion. This is not womankind's fault. This is just the culture that has raised us to believe that there is not room for us all. And by the way, there currently isn't. That's the reality.
The scarcity is a real thing.
It is.
Because we need to create this space and continue to push proactively to create more seats at the table. Instead of trying to retrofit ourselves into a system built by and for men, we need to create our own damn system. And we can do it better. We are cooperators by nature. We are talking about how we are wired and how we have evolved. With that in mind, we need to carve out more space and do it in the way that we are naturally inclined to do so, which is with the help of one another. Yeah. I do believe that women, I believe the future is female.
Yeah, I believe that too. But I think we also have we have a long way to go.
Yes.
that is why it's so important that we all continue to do whatever we can in our communities, in our homes, however we can. You are doing things on a much larger scale. And for me as well, to be able to see the impact that you have, I am just your terribly proud friend, that whenever I see you giving a speech or talking or saying something that is in support of people who have been marginalized and who have been oppressed, and it has been such a joy to see you come into that phenomenal power and knowing that you are powerful and that you can impact in such a positive way. And I want to talk to you about what the catalyst was for you in your life, where you connected to that possibility, because it wasn't a reality yet, it was just a possibility.
Yeah, it's amazing because you and I have known each other for so long. And you have watched this evolve in real time. And I am incredibly flattered because you've always been somebody I've looked up to. And I'm incredibly flattered to hear you say that. And it touches me in a real way. As you know, it's not been easy for me. I think by the time I was 13, life had not been conservative and giving me examples, lessons of the kind of unfairness and justice.
What does that mean? What did that look like for you?
Not only was I not raised with any privilege or money or access to anything, I was acutely aware of a power dynamic, both at home and in my school system and in my community, whether that was represented in church or just in the images I received from entertainment, from on TV, from the news, from the world that I had such limited access to. All of this made me acutely aware of just how much the deck was stacked against me.
But how did you know that at such a young age?
Because
No, a lot of people don't.
I believe they do, but we have not been having the conversations in the way that we're having now. And the conversations give us the tools to recognize it.
Having conversation is often a luxury that so many people don't have. And I think that it's something that is free. It's affordable for everyone. It takes time, right? And that is not something that even us, as we get so busy in life, we get so far away from the very simple things that allow us to connect to ourselves and to other people. But I suspect that those kinds of conversations were not happening in the trailer where you grew up. And so my question is, how did you know that the deck was stacked against you if you didn't have anyone to process that with?
I didn't. I saw it in the lack of conversation. I saw it in the non.
What was missing?
Yeah, I saw it in the nonverbal. I mean, sure, I did have direct information telling me, I had a father telling me it would be preposterous for a woman to, run a company. I remember I said, I want to be president one day when I was really young. And my dad said, woman can't be president. What would happen when she had her period? Huh? I'm like, am I missing something in the logic
I wonder what he thought would happen.
I don't really, I think he thought naturally once a month there could be, our finger would be resting on that button.
Right.
And I love my father and, I have compassion for him.
Of course.
And his limited access to information at the time. And I also have to compliment him on his ability to adapt. This is somebody who now has a tremendous amount of respect, has a major learning curve, but I've had to teach him those lessons. I've had to be a leader in that sense. And I've done so with compassion. I've watched the positive effect. I remember him standing proud when I received an award from the Human Rights Campaign or a marriage equality nonprofit. And I had my then wife at the time with me, and he stood proud at the gala. It was in Texas, and I gave my speech on the power of compassionate leadership and changing, and the real time effects that it can it can have. So I want to say that, but
Of course.
those were the explicit examples of how, I was told. But the same thing happened to me in school when, I, was told I had to dress a certain way and I couldn't remove my jacket and my skirt had to be past my knees.
That never worked with me when they told me that at school. I was like, why?
Exactly.
How is this going to affect my education? How long my skirt is?
Exactly.
Really, it's nothing to do with it.
I actually remember saying, I was 14 years old, I remember sitting in the dean's office saying, why is it incumbent on me for the behavior of men and boys? Why is it not incumbent on them to control their behavior and treat me like a person, a human being with respect and dignity? Why is it my problem? Why is the burden on me to control how they feel and how they act and behave around me?
Let's talk about your advocacy for women and girls around sexual assault and why that is important to you.
Violence against women in all forms, and violence against women can manifest in it's not just sexual or domestic violence. It is social violence. It's economic violence. It's the kind of things that you and I talk about all the time, but we need to start recognizing, I think, finding solidarity with one another and community with one another, our tribe. In finding that is recognizing that it's not one particular form of violence that's applicable towards women. Gender-based violence takes a lot of forms. And that has always been something that, as you know, I've been acutely aware of. And I have been speaking about for a long time. But I feel incredibly lucky to have an opportunity, not just to have a voice, but to have it heard, to have
impact.
Yes. So if I have a voice, it is I see it because with incredible power and platform comes incredible responsibility. So I see it in recognizing my voice and its impact. I am acutely aware of my responsibility to speak on behalf of those who are silenced, who haven't found theirs, or who aren't able to.
Which I commend. And I've always said this about you, that when you find that voice, there is going to be no shutting you up.
And here I am.
And here you are. And it's beautiful and profound. And I see the impact. And as I said, as your friend and someone who loves you, it has been one of the things that has filled my heart consistently in watching you thrive in that connection to your voice. But what for me is missing from the narrative is your own personal experience, because we don't pick things out of the air. We pick things to advocate for based on our own experiences. And I'm curious why your own narrative around gender-based violence and the many forms that it takes, that personal narrative is not part of the public story. And I'm curious why.
Well, I guess the short of it is I don't feel like the worst things that have happened to me are the most interesting parts of me or my story. I think what I choose to do with it is the reason I don't talk about a certain period of my life, the reason I don't speak about that, honestly, it's the least interesting part of my life. I don't talk about the violence that I went through. I don't talk about my own experience with sexual violence. I don't talk about the specifics because those individual acts, which I have survived many different forms of violence, many different forms, they're not the more interesting parts of me. It's the systems that allow them to be so pervasive and the actors of those injustices and that violence to function and continue to function with impunity. That's what I'm interested in breaking, baby.
Well, that's the solution piece of it, right? It's like actually, and I respect what you're saying about the events themselves are almost inconsequential because they happen to so many of us and in so many forms. And most of us have some form of trauma in regards to violence towards women. It is how you respond to those and how you take those and allow those to inform how you move forward. And that is the difference between someone who survives and someone who thrives.
Yeah.
Right? And I remember saying this to you, saying every single thing that has happened to you and everything that is happening to you at certain times where I have been with you or you've been with me when I've been going through it, those things, when we come through the other side, those things will be phenomenal gifts because we will be able to sit across from somebody, anybody who has had a similar experience and be able to look them in the eye and say, I know how you feel.
This happens to me every day, but it used to be I was approached and people, were approaching me because they responded to a character or project, and that's wonderful, but more and more the percentage of those people that approach me for a selfie because I was this character or that character is overshadowed by the number of people, men and women, who come up to me and they say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And that is every day increasing. And that's what matters to me. That is what I'm proud of. I mean, of course I'm proud of my projects. Of course I'm proud of what I've been able to accomplish in other ways.
That goes without saying, but to be able to help someone's heart heal through advocacy or through sharing your story and sharing the recovery and the solutions, that and the experience of how you are affecting and you're helping people heal, that is why you don't feel invisible anymore. Just having one person who sees you, who hears you, who believes in you is the difference between making it, and I don't mean making it in a successful financial realm, I mean surviving in life and not.
Yes.
A little tiny thing like that is so monumental, and you can do that through the work that you're doing. You just came back from Capitol Hill recently.
Yeah.
And are you working with Kamala on this initiative? Because she has been a big advocate for, she doesn't like to call it revenge porn. She calls it cyber exploitation because she said revenge porn would indicate that the person was complicit in being exploited online, and they were not.
Think about it. That's a very important thing. Revenge porn is problematic for a number of reasons, even though it's catchy. And people automatically have some connection to it. It sounds like something.
Well, it's clickbaity.
Yes. It implies that there was an action for which the victim, in this case, was responsible. For you to seek revenge, you have to have done. It implies somebody did something wrong.
They were, yeah.
And that also implies intent to harm, which is limiting for many, many reasons. If we narrow the definition of what we call non-consensual pornography, if we limit it to qualifiers like the intent to cause harm, when somebody like me has their photos hacked and it goes online on the internet, that person doesn't necessarily intend to cause me harm. When it's distributed and redistributed among people, whether it's to trade as like baseball cards, for social equity, for profit on porn sites, the intent to cause harm is a qualifier that's unnecessarily put on non-consensual pornography, and it shouldn't be there because it's not necessarily
always a part. Well, it's interesting that it's even called pornography because the thing is that an image of you, and I've seen those images. You and I have seen them, right? I mean, you obviously were in them, but I've seen them when this thing happened, when you were hacked along with many other women that I know. But it's interesting, it's called pornography because those are personal images that you took yourself that were shared with someone who you were in an intimate sexual relationship with. So the fact, and most of the time with what is considered revenge pornography, they are personal pictures. They're not things that people are putting out on the internet for the purpose of being used as pornography. It's a very different intention.
Right, but the intention changes and therefore the definition becomes applicable when you remove consent. So when someone else takes those images that you did not consent to being used in that way, they are exploiting you. They are using it as pornography. They are literally taking something that wasn't pornography in the context in which it was created. Yeah. And they're using it as such. And whether it is to exploit you, whether it is to blackmail you, whether it is to shame you, whether it is to not even necessarily intend to cause you harm, but just use it as a commercial or a social,
Well, I think that's part of the problem is that people who think that it is with no consequence that they would share an intimate photograph of a individual, because it happens to men and women and all genders, who would share an intimate image that is shared on a personal level, the fact that they don't realize that it can cause monumental harm is part of the problem. The fact that there is no education around the impact of this is also part of the problem. So you're looking at it from a legislative side with the work you're trying to do, which I want you to speak more about. But there's also the whole education piece. Why is this not talked about in schools? Why is this not part of sex ed? Why is it? And sex ed needs to start in first grade, kindergarten, because by the time they get to looking at naked selfies, it's too late.
Right. I agree.
Right?
We need to have co-ed. We need to have non-gender specific sexual education, and the curriculum should be based in the idea and the concept from a very early age of what consent is.
We have to give language to these discussions. And by you going to Capitol Hill and by you advocating to try and enforce legislation that puts in place consequences for doing things like exploiting personal images that are shared in the context of an intimate relationship, you're shining a light on the bigger issue. And hopefully there will be a trickle-down effect where people will be like, what's Amber Heard doing in Capitol Hill? Oh, she's there for cyber exploitation. What's that? Like, it will start the conversation and it will have a trickle-down effect.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's the beautiful thing about legislation. It is one thing to change attitudes. When we talk about changing cultural attitudes, we talk about imparting change. We have to appreciate how much of that is informed by legislation, which codifies it, which is my goal in this effort in DC with what I'm working with the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative on, is to pass this federal bill that we're calling SHIELD, with the support of Senator Harris and Representative Speer and our Republican co-sponsor, Congressman Katko.
A Republican co-sponsor?
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is a bipartisan, our efforts to pass this as a bipartisan bill. Look, non-consensual pornography is a borderless crime. So this is part of why it is so important to create legislation, federal legislation, that makes it a federal crime to distribute non-consensual pornography. It provides not only the basis for information, access to resources, but it also provides resources for law enforcement and the public alike. And by codifying our commitment to ending non-consensual pornography and cyber exploitation, moving it from fleeting cycles of outrage and viral social media movements, and instead we're enshrining it in our most important legislative institution. I will continue in the work I'm doing with RISE and the work we're doing to pass an international sexual assault survivors Bill of Rights in the form of a UN resolution. It's taking the model that Amanda Wynn, who started RISE, what she's doing and what she has done successfully with RISE is gone state by state to fight for basic civil rights. And that can be manifested in the forms of something simple like not having your rape kit destroyed without you knowing about it, which happens. And it was going to happen to her. And she lived in Massachusetts, of all places. And they had a 6-month policy. And she did have to pay for it to keep it open. She'd have to show up and fight every 6 months to keep her rape kit on the shelf. And she wasn't even going to be told about it. She found out, and
she's living in limbo, waiting for that rape kit to get tested and processed, and no one would even have told her that it had been destroyed. And how can she process? How can anyone move on? They're in a holding pattern.
This is exactly the thing that we were talking about before. It isn't the rape. It was the system after. Everything she went through after was so much worse. And I remember at various times in my life thinking, wow, I didn't know it was this bad. I always knew the deck was stacked against me. I didn't realize that it was this fucking bad. And it is. The system after, the harassment after, in the form of fighting to have your basic dignity.
Starting with when you report a rape, when you don't necessarily get a female who is trained, you get a male who's at the counter. You don't automatically get a woman who is trained in rape counseling. You don't have a psychologist. You don't have female doctors testing you. You are not walked through the process.
And in several states now, you don't even have the right to reproductive health care post-rape. That's how little we respect women's bodies, because for centuries and centuries
Been a commodity.
through the governments, and men have tried to always maintain the right to control a woman's body.
Yeah, I always like to remind people, not that everyone needs reminding, but some people need reminding, that we are only here today because we are standing on the shoulders of the women who have fought for generations before us, the ones who we know of, and the thousands and thousands who we don't. And it is thanks to them that we get to stand here today, and we get to have conversations like we're having, and we get to have the level of awareness, and we get to have the solutions. And we do have a path that has been forged by many, many, many women and some men for us to be where we are today. And it is truly an honor and a privilege to be part of continuing to help move this forward. And I am grateful that I get to be on the path with you.
Thank you. That's why I've been working so much in DC this year. Over the past year, I have had the incredible fortune to work with individuals like Holly Jacobs and the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, like Amanda Wynn with RISE. I have found partnerships with women who have taken an incredible injustice, something really horrible that happened to them, and they have truly taken a terrible experience that's happened to them and truly turned it into the least interesting part of their lives. And they have affected change and changed the world for millions. I mean, just alone, the UN, the Sexual Assault Survivors Resolution at the UN would give civil rights to 1.6 billion people that are affected by it. And that is not counting boys and men. It's not counting the innumerous and majority of those who do not report.
Which is the majority, by the way. Only 1 in 3 females and 1 in 5 males.
That's 1.6 billion people that do report. That is insane, that number. So we're talking, when I say billions, I'm saying billions of people. This is not in the US, this is worldwide. I can't think of a more important thing to do. It is just dedicating your life to service. You have to change. You have to.
That's all there is at the end of the day is, like, I hope for myself, and I suspect that you feel a similar way, when we're old ladies and we're going, God, we've known each other a long time, and all these crazy things we've been through in life, and we've you've seen my kids grow up, and hopefully, maybe you'll have kids one day and I'll get to be a godmother to your babies. And, when we're old ladies, I hope we're going to be able to look at the ways that we have left positive impact, and that only comes down to, are you dedicated to a life of service? And if you are, it makes it all worthwhile. And it can be in a tiny little way, it can be on a big scale. It's whatever anyone can do.
Imagine when your children or their children look at you and ask, when Sylvan's daughter or son look at you and they say, what was that revolution like? Because we are in the middle of a revolution. We are in the revolution.
We are.
And when they ask you what it was like, were you there? You're going to be able to look at them and say, I was there. I'm there.
Every day. Like it or not, rain or shine.
Right. Yeah. As we say, I'm tired, but the war must go on.
Today in our conversation, Amber and I talked about an important organization called RISE. If you are a survivor of sexual assault or an ally or simply want to know more about the work they do, please go and check them out at risenow.us. The Conversation with Amanda de Cadenet is a Spotify original podcast. Executive produced by me, Amanda de Cadenet. From Spotify, our executive producers are Natalie Tuller and Erica Clark. Our production partner is Neon Hum, which includes the team of Jonathan Hirsch, Catherine St. Louis, Courtney Kosak, and Marissa Schneiderman. And while I've got your attention, please listen to all episodes of The Conversation with Amanda de Cadenet on Spotify for free.